All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Melanie from Pearson again. We are recording this training. We're going ahead with the PARCC Technology Coordinator training. We do have Cassie Lynett on from OSSE. And Cassie, I have unmuted you if you want to jump in and say hello.
Thanks, Melanie. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the training. We're glad you're here. It looks like we have quite a few of you today. Please know that we will be posting the recording of this training as well as the slides on our website in the near future so that you have access to them if you do need them again, but we're glad you're here. At the end of the training, we will be able to open the phone lines potentially for some questions or get some questions through the chat box. So I'm mostly here to enjoy the training. Melanie will be leading it, but I'm happy to answer questions that are specific to OSSE at the end. So thanks so much for being here.
Perfect. Thanks, Cassie. So I do have the chat window open. If there are questions that are chatted at me, I will do my best to answer them during the training. We will open up lines at the end for anyone that wants to speak up and ask a question over the phone. Okay. Go ahead and get started here. So just a quick run through of our agenda for today. We're going to be covering available resources that you have at your fingertips to navigate through PARCC testing this spring. We will have some slides on what's new with TestNav 8, what's new with Pearson Access Next, slides on technology setup, how to set up an infrastructure trial, and then slides with some checklists for before testing begins, during testing, things to watch out for, and then after testing, how to close out everything when testing is complete, and then a couple slides on some additional information. So really quick, just some resources. We have the user manuals are all posted. PARCC.pearson.com is the main, what we call the portal for all information, mostly everything you can get to linked from PARCC.pearson.com. Technology setup, you'll see technology guidelines, user guidelines, manuals, the test administrator manuals, the test coordinator manuals, those are all also posted there, and then the AF&A manual, the accessibility features and accommodations manual. The training modules that are available are also available on PARCC.pearson.com. There's training modules, technology readiness, creating and editing TestNav configurations, precaching test content, and the TestNav App Check. There are also under that same link some shorter YouTube videos on little like 3 or 4 or 5 minute tasks to complete throughout testing. So go ahead, and those are new this year, so go ahead and check those out if you are interested. The training modules are more robust and lengthy and in detail, but the YouTube modules, if you're just trying to complete one task, are kind of nice to go to for just a quick review of watching somebody go through the steps. Another resource available to you are the technology bulletins. And again, this is a screenshot of PARCC.pearson.com, and if you had clicked under bulletins, all of the technology bulletins that have been posted or sent out previously are posted here. You can always pull those bulletins down if you haven't been receiving them by email and just want to read them online. So we'll jump into the meat of the training. We'll start talking through some TestNav 8 topics. So just a quick refresher, TestNav 8 can be accessed 2 ways by the student. It can be, you can access it through a browser, through an internet browser, or through the app. We'll go through the browser first, and then we'll go through the app. Browser-based requirements, you'll see OS requirements, Windows requirements. There is the update from in spring of 2018 that Mac OS, Sierra 10.12 and 10.13 are supported through the app now. It is a change from spring of 2017. If you do need the supported version of Firefox, it can be downloaded at download.testnav.com. So just a quick refresher on what's available for TestNav browser requirements. The time that you would use browser-based testing, really if you're using the thin client or VDI, the app is not supporting thin client systems. So we recommend that you use Firefox 52, and that, again, available at download.testnav.com. Same location as where the TestNav app is available to download. We'll get to the how of downloading it shortly, but first, the requirements that you would need to be able to install the app. You can see the OS requirements: Chrome, iOS, Linux, OS, Windows. You can click on any of these. Again, this is download.testnav.com site that will allow you to see what's available to download and then those setup instructions. So these are the requirements for using the TestNav app. The TestNav 8 requirements documentation, there is a user guide for TestNav 8. This is a clickable link and will take you to our online support guide. The new operating systems supported, iOS 10.2, 10.2.1, 10.3.1 through 10.3.3, and then 11.2.5, and then an update just in the last day since we finalized the slide. We are supporting 11.2.6 now. So we will update this before we send it out, but wanted to make sure to draw attention to that. If anyone has had 11.2.6 pushed, it is supported by TestNav. Other operating systems supported: the Chrome, the Mac OS, the Windows 10. I won't spend too much time on those since they're all listed here. So the iOS 11.2.5 does have has a required update. 11.2.5 is the minimum version for customers testing on iOS 11. So if you have anything iOS 11 through 11.2.2, you do need to update to a minimum of 11.2.5. It can also be 11.2.6, but either 11.2.5 or 11.2.6. So just a note that this is a required update. Configurations needed if you're testing students on an iPad. Allowing the microphone is a one-time prompt. Allowing the app to self-lock is a prompt. So the guided access mode is no longer needed for TestNav. It will actually prevent students from accessing their test. So when students sign into a test, they have to just click yes, that the device will be locked down until they submit their test or log out. If they do click no, they will need to sign in again. So new for 2018. The app, again, how to download. So the app is available at download.testnav.com. Kind of the same from before, pop-up blocker, student login experience on Chromebooks and iPads is the same. Additional notes, browser-based testing is no longer required for use with assistive technology. The app is now compatible with assistive technology, and then assistive technology guidelines that are available. All these are hyperlinks taking you to where you would need to go. So here is that downloads.testnav.com page, and you can see when I went to the screen, it recognized right away I was using Windows. If you are using a Mac, it would recognize that you were using a Mac. If you do need to download TestNav for another platform, if you're using a system that recognizing it as something else, you can always click that, download TestNav for another platform, and switch platforms. But all is available at download.testnav.com. For TestNav 8, what was new this year, we applied a lot of these updates in fall of 2017, but if you haven't tested since spring of 2017, you won't have seen these features, or your students won't have seen these features quite yet. Added audio and video playback speed options in the video content. So there'll be a little icon that allows you to change those playback speeds. There is a close option to the ASL pop-up screen, so you can open it and close it as students want to use that ASL video in the test. There is an added verification capability to primary and secondary save locations, and it was with that configuration error of 1017 and 1018. So there's that added verification. We've added speed options in the audio and video player content. The updated Protractor tool now has single degree markings. It was previously 5 degree markings. And then there's been improvements to the zoom number line and the number line item functionality to honor, the update is to honor those PNP color contrast settings. More of what's new. So these are updates that are applied to spring of 2018. So if you did have any TestNav use in the fall, you wouldn't have seen them, but you will have seen them for this spring. There is that new layout to the TI-84 graphing calculator. Students will see the volume control settings now in the text-to-speech tool. There's an auto-scroll functionality in the text-to-speech tool. New error messages, 3020 and 3020 twice, display when the TestNav user is entering either Control-Alt-Delete or Command-Option-Escape. So you'll see that error message. Improvements to the Answer Eliminator tool, honoring that PNP color contrast setting, and the eliminator lines in the tool no longer entirely cover the response options. So more of what students would see new this year. Again, app versions for spring of 2018. If you're checking to see which app version you have downloaded, it should be 1.6.5. If you're on the desktop, if you're in a Chromebook, 1.6.92. If you're on an iPad, 1.6.3. Android app, 1.6.5. And then your Proctor caching software, which we will discuss at length later, is the 2016.17. So just some high-level changes, updates that students will see in TestNav 8 for spring of 2018 PARCC testing. We'll move on to just a couple of changes in Pearson Access Next. Again, Pearson Access Next is the portal used to register students to be able to take those tests in TestNav. The home screen, the login, the green sign-in button. This is how you know you are in your production environment. dc.pearsonaccessnext.com will be your URL. Just some main highlights of the main screens you'll see. You've got your home setup, testing reports, support buttons, and those all can be accessed through setup, testing, and reports. What's new this year? So these are just a few minor changes to Pearson Access Next from last year. Now the auto-generated emails, so anything that you receive if you create an additional order, for example, you'll get an email saying that you've created the additional order. That email now includes the URL from the Pearson Access Next site that it originated from. So if you're in your production, dc.pearsonaccessnext.com site, or if you're in training, trng.pearsonaccessnext.com. Remember, there's the two sites. There's the production and the training site. And so on the training site, you would see that training URL, and if you're in your production site, you would see the DC URL, so that those URLs are now included in the email from the site in which the email was generated. User accounts that have a delayed active start date. Often states will, or districts or schools will add users, say they're test administrators, they're proctors, but they don't want them to be able to have access to Pearson Access Next until maybe the day of testing or the day before testing begins. So they'll delay that active start date to the date of testing. So now Pearson Access Next will delay the email notification that the new user account was created for that person until that active date is happened. So it will not send, if you add new user accounts now for, let's say, middle of March, they will not get the email until closer to the start date. There was some improved sorting on the Move Students Between Sessions task page. It was appearing as random sorting, and now it's sorted by last name, so something just a little bit more helpful if you're having to move students in between test sessions. And then if you're doing a user file export, you now have the ability to exclude deleted user accounts. There's a checkbox that says, include deleted user accounts or not. So you can kind of check that box if you want to see those deleted accounts in your file export. And that's really all that has changed from Pearson Access Next from last year to this year. So just a few kind of tweaks to the application, but nothing overall no crazy new process or anything drastically different from last year. So if you've done this before, hopefully memory will serve you well and you'll be good. Jumping to technology setup. So a couple of network configurations to add. So the TestNav 8 domains and ports, won't read them all, but just make sure that they're listed. Again, you'll get this PowerPoint, so you'll have all of this information, but precaching local network ports, Pearson Access Next domain imports, Pearson Access Next emails. All of the emails come from @support.pearson.com, so make sure to add that so you can receive the emails coming from the system. Proctor caching, so just a high-level review of Proctor caching. Proctor caching is what we set up in Pearson Access Next to kind of ease the work on your bandwidth for when students test in TestNav. So Proctor caching kind of takes two, it talks between Pearson Access Next and TestNav. It's software that you'll install. I'll go through those steps in a minute, but so that you can download that encrypted content to your computer or wherever you choose, your server and computer, a local copy of all of that test content, so then students can access it when they're accessing TestNav. They can access it directly from your local computer and not be using your ISP and bandwidth and all of that fun. It is highly recommended, especially if you're testing many students online. Just a graphic if you want to kind of take a look, if you think in pictures like I do. We think of the TestNav server, the encrypted content makes its way down to district, makes its way down to a school building, and then into the classroom, and then you have your caching station. And if you use Proctor caching, you can see that all that content then just goes to the cache station. And if it does not, it goes directly up to the TestNav server, pulling down each time. So just kind of a picture to think about and see the difference between caching and not caching the content prior to testing. Requirements for Proctor caching: it only runs on Windows or Mac. You do not need a server-based operating system. There are hardware requirements that can be found at this link. The TCP ports are included. It does require a fixed internal IP address. You can use the app check feature within TestNav to verify that you do have connection to the Proctor caching device. So if you've used Proctor caching, if you used it in last spring, there is an enhancement this year if we have any republished content, and then you will have improvements to the UI when reloading and refreshing content. There is the requirement that schools upgrade to the latest version of the Proctor caching tool, so that software needs to be updated. The most recent version is 2017.16, so we need to make sure that that gets downloaded at download.testnav.com under this ProctorCache. Make sure you update that recent version to 2017.16. Going to how to set it up, you'll download the installer at download.testnav.com. You'll run it. You'll start the Proctor caching service. If it's not auto-started by the installer, you'll add whichever computer to your TestNav configuration within Pearson Access, and we will go through those steps in the next few slides with some screenshots. But you'll need to set up that configuration in Pearson Access Next at the district or school level, and then you can use app check, like we said, with a configuration identifier that's in the TestNav configuration in Pearson Access Next to just make sure that those client computers can talk to the Proctor caching machine. So to download and install the Proctor caching installer, you'll see on that same screen, download.testnav.com, we have download ProctorCache. That will just download and an auto install. To create the TestNav configuration, you're going to be in Pearson Access Next under Setup, and you'll go down to TestNav Configurations. Make sure you're in the system that's blue, so that will indicate the PARCC DC Pearson Access Next site. You can see that hyperlink here, and then if you're trying to do this setup in the training environment, you would click on this hyperlink. Once you've selected your administration, in the upper right corner of your drop-down menu, you'll go to Setup and then Create and Edit TestNav configurations. To create the TestNav configuration, you'll just enter configuration name. When I set up mine for my testing, I just say Melanie's computer, or you can your school name or classroom where the computer is existing. Under the organizations, if you're at the district, you would select any district or school organizations that you want to put in that TestNav configuration, kind of be under that umbrella. Then you'll see more information that you'll need to enter: the computer name, the IP address, and the port. You will click Uses Pearson Precaching software. Then if you want to specify a student response file backup location, you would put in that primary location here if you're on Windows, secondary location here, primary for Mac, secondary for Mac, Android, Chrome, iOS secondary, Linux primary, secondary. So you'll see this is a configuration identifier that you would use in that TestNav app check to make sure that your client stations can talk to the Precaching computer. So PC demo is the name, that computer name that we gave this one for this screenshot example. Once you have completed the TestNav configuration, you'd click Create, and then it should appear and say successful, that your changes were saved. Under configuration details, if you had clicked on the name of the configuration that you had just done, you would be able to edit anything if you needed to. You're in that same task, Create, Edit TestNav configurations. You can add additional organizations to the configuration. You can edit the settings, etc. Anything you can edit here, and then you would just click Save before you leave that screen. So now that you can see this full screen, the multiple TestNav settings, if you want to change the default configuration, you can check or uncheck default computer used for sessions. That is something that you can do at this time in this TestNav configuration, Create, Edit TestNav configurations task. You can also delete the configuration in this task. So to override the Precaching computer, again, caution the use of that. There are some instances where you've got students in a room and they're trying to test, and you need to bypass ProctorCaching. Somebody's office is locked and their computer is shut down, and you need to just go right through and use internet and send all traffic out through your internet instead of accessing the ProctorCaching computer. You can do that by clicking that Precaching computer override. Districts with limited bandwidth, again, could have network issues because you are then using your internet instead of using that local talk between the client computers and the ProctorCaching machine. But there is that option if you get into that position. Pearson Access Next and Precaching setups, again, TestNav configurations work from school to district. It's kind of the hierarchy of it is it works, a school Precaching machine will take precedence over a district. So if you set up a configuration at the district level and someone sets up one at the school level, the school will then use the school configuration. The Precaching server option and session details, again, that will only display if there are 2 or more Precaching machines to choose from at the school or district. This can be used to override the default district school TestNav configuration. I did just have a chat come through that I want to make sure to draw attention to. Do we need to set up the ProctorCaching software if we are using the TestNav app on Chromebooks? And the answer to that is yes, it is highly recommended. Using and downloading this ProctorCaching software on one machine, setting that machine up as a ProctorCaching server, and downloading all encrypted content to that machine, and then having all Chromebooks then attached to that machine. So good question. So Precaching test content, this is then what that installer, so once you've installed Proctor caching software, in Pearson Access Next, you'll actually be able to pre-cache the test content. So you'll go to Setup, Pre-caching Test Content. You can either pre-cache by test or you can pre-cache through the sessions. It is entirely up to you depending on how you have your system set up. I think probably pre-caching by test might be the easier option instead of going through all of the sessions, but if you do just want to cache for one session, you have the ability to do that as option 2. So then by test, this is kind of what it'll look like. You'll select the tests that you're caching, and it will cache all forms in each of those tests. You'll select the server, their computer that you're caching to, and you'll click pre-cache. If you're caching by session, it'll look more like this. Going to the Proctor caching test content screen, after clicking pre-cache, you'll kind of see your sessions. So a little bit different depending on how you want it to look for your setup. If you see in here, this is what the installer that you've downloaded installed, the Proctor caching software that you've downloaded. Once you start caching, this test screen will appear in a second window. If you don't see this window, reattempt to cache the content, and then pay attention to this note. You must either disable your pop-up blocker or add an exception to allow pop-ups from the pre-caching URL. And all these instructions and steps are in the Proctor caching information on download.testnav.com, but just some things to note that do cause a few headaches here and there every once in a while. So Diagnostics, you'll see a couple of tabs. In the Proctor caching software, you'll see the Test tab for information about forms and test content and caching status with each of those, and then Clients tab to monitor connectivity. Under that Test tab, you will see all of the content that is being encrypted and downloaded at the test level and at that form level. There is functionality available to purge the test content. It is not required if you need to recache any test content. When clicking purge, a password will be required. We'll go over that kind of in some after testing steps. You do not need to click refresh. It just does its work on its own. And then clicking any test name will display encrypted individual items from the test. So just to see what that would look like if you would have clicked that. So test tab status, green, content is cached, okay. Yellow, it's either not cached, it's preparing, it's waiting. There's quite a few forms and they're quite large, so you'll see quite a bit of yellow that eventually turn to green. If you have anything in red, something failed for some reason. So check out the errors in the guide to kind of work through some of these errors. If you go to the Clients tab, anyone that's connected to TestNav, they'll be listed here through by their IP address. You can click on Client Details, click on a computer name, and it'll display the Client Details screen. Again, on the Clients List tab, green, everything is active and okay. Yellow might be idle. The client was idle for certain periods of time. If they are inactive, they'll be removed from the list. So they won't appear on that Clients List tab under Status. Under that Settings tab, it was a third tab over, you'll see the URL when you're logged into Proctor caching. The Settings tab is where you can change the password if you need to purge the test content. There is guidance on Proctor caching password settings. Please review the Setup and Use Proctor caching document. It's walking through almost everything that I'm walking through now, maybe in more detail, but something to use before you kind of go, another resource you can use to go to before you go through Proctor caching. So the next group of slides we're going to get into are around infrastructure trial. So an infrastructure trial, go to the next slide. It's really setting up everything in your environment, your Proctor caching, your TestNav configurations, your test sessions. It's setting everything up that you would set up in the live environment in the training environment and doing a trial run. So that would be I hovered over that training URL, that trng.pearsonaccessnext.com. You'll run your infrastructure trial. Again, I think of it as a trial run. You're going to check that your devices are set up, that your network can handle load, that your Proctor caching configuration is working, that everybody knows how to handle the computer-based part of the PARCC testing, and then the end goal that students are familiar with all the tools and the format. So there are practice tests in that training area of PearsonAccessNext.com, and we will go through those steps, but students can take those practice tests, and then at the same time you can be testing your setup, caching, and everything else. So it's a good trial run. Preparations, things to just be keeping in mind, really how long it would take to administer. If you have feedback, send that on to your DCC, send that on to OSSE if you're a district and you're having trouble. They can be in touch with Pearson. You should involve district and schools, especially have communication about who will be caching data, the test content, and how you'll want to structure your setup for district and school testing. District and school setup for school testing. So where to start? So how to start setting up an infrastructure trial. We have this Pearson Access location for setting up the infrastructure trial. It's going to be trng.pearsonaccessnext.com. It will, I think, send you there if you go to this link. You'll want to make sure in the training environment everyone has an ID, everyone has our user login information, password. You'll want to make sure everybody reviews all the manuals and training modules. And then there is, out at this link, there is a Spring 2018 PARCC Infrastructure Trial Readiness Guide. So download that. It's on the Avocet page, which is also linked from parcc.pearson.com, but a direct link right here will take you to be able to pull that infrastructure trial readiness guide. Again, technology setup, kind of reviewing some of the things that we've talked about, configuring your network, getting that Proctor caching installer and TestNav configuration set up, your device readiness, making sure that those apps are updated, your iPads, if you're using iPads or Chromebooks, that everything is up to date and the devices are ready, and then setting up those configurations in Pearson Access Next. In Pearson Access Next, a few slides on just what to do in the training site to get ready for the infrastructure trial. You'll be able to create sample students, create test sessions, prepare those test sessions, and print student testing tickets. This next slide is going to have a screenshot of what this looks like in the training environment of Pearson Access Next. You will see everything instead of blue is brown for headers. So that is kind of a visual indicator that you would be using the training site instead of your production DC site. Just helpful to be able to see that more easily than having to always check your URLs. You'll choose your test administration, Spring 2018. To create those sample students, you'll click Setup and select Generate Sample Students, and then you'll click Start. You will then just kind of follow the wizard through generating sample students. You'll select your organization, if you want to put them in a class, the grade level that you want to add the sample students in, the test that you want the sample students to be able to have access to, and again, this is a practice test, online test format, how many sample students you want to create. You can create any from 1 to 99 in one step. So if you want to say set up 50 sample students, you'd put in 50 and you'd click Generate. To create your test sessions, you will want to go to Testing and then click on Sessions, and then in the Tasks drop-down, you'll select Create and Edit Sessions, and you'll click Start. You'll have to fill in some, again, kind of just everything with the red stars required. Create a session name, so Mr. Jones, 3rd grade, math classroom, select the school, the tests that you want the practice tests that you want the students to take. These steps are identical also to production. So if you are creating a production test session, the steps will be the same. The start date that you want to schedule it for, this does not bind you to starting on that date, but just more of a guide of when you think you'll be able to start. Your form group type, this is where you will choose between main and read aloud, and then select the pre-caching computer if there is one that you are choosing to go through for your infrastructure trial, and then click Create. Then to add your students to the session by the class that you just set up, you'll find by class. It'll be available. Just click in this box, so this drop-down will be available. If you've created the sample students, then you'll click Create. In the test session, once you're in the test session, a note that it does need to be prepared before students can log in and take their tests. This is one of the first steps that happens. In training, this can be done anytime. In training, everything's open and available for spring infrastructure trials right now. I do want to make a note because I don't think I talk about this later. There's no other slide later. But preparing a test session, and we do talk about accommodations later in this training, but I do want to make note that the step of preparing a test session will assign a form to students, and it will be based off what their test registration record shows at that time. So if you have a student that needs text-to-speech, that needs to be updated in the student test registration in Pearson Access Next before you click Prepare, because Prepare will assign a form to them that does not have text-to-speech if you have not indicated that they need a text-to-speech form in their test registration. Again, I will go through that, but just I wanted to make sure that you tied the need for all accommodations to be up to date before you click the Prepare button. So then starting the session just means, yep, I'm going to start it. Kids can log in, that we're ready to start testing. We do have the lock and unlock features again this year. None of this, again, has changed from last year, so this is really high-level refresher. You can start at any time. All of this is open for spring infrastructure trial. Under resources, you can access the student testing tickets, so you can either print all testing tickets or just select a few students that you want to print testing tickets for. That will be available under that resources drop-down under your test session. Okay, so those were the steps to create the infrastructure trial. Again, high level, nothing's changed major from last year. So now we're going to go to before testing. So we're going back to our production environment. We're getting everything ready for your actual PARCC testing, not practice tests, not infrastructure trial. I just was talking about accommodations. SR PNP data is loaded into Pearson Access Next, so the student registration and personal needs profile, accommodations, and accessibility features, all that's uploaded into Pearson Access Next by OSSE. I believe you have access to update all of those student registration records once the state's complete with that. You can use this import-export feature of the SRPMP before testing, during testing, and after testing to update student registrations. So to update student registrations, you can either do a file upload, an import, export, and again, this is the same as last year, or you may just go through Pearson Access Next and do it all through the UI, student by student. Really the rule of thumb is if you need to do a bulk upload, you would want to do a file import, and if you just need to update a couple of students, it might be easier to just go through the UI and search those students and assign their tests or define their PNP requirements for their needed accommodations. Both methods access the exact same student data fields. It's just a matter of if you're comfortable and quick with the file import, then that will be in your comfort zone if you have many, many, many students to update, or if going through the UIs within your comfort zone, they both get to the same exact information and do the same exact thing. To when you're importing the PNP file, a quick note under the Support tab, and this is the only location where this information is posted. You have to be logged into Pearson Access Next to get to this field definitions document, but it does walk you through that import-export PNP file field by field, so column A, column B, column C, and all the requirements that go along with that. So again, if you are interested in creating your own file or manipulating an export and then re-importing, whichever you choose, all those field definitions are located in this document. So in Pearson Access Next, you'd go to the Support button and then down to Spring 2018, PARCC Spring 2018 Student Registration PNP Field Definitions. To import that file, again, you go back to your setup, home setup. You'd go to Import, Export Data. Oh, I'm sorry. This is if you. So that is. Let me go back one slide. So if you want to import a file, you would go to Import, Export Data. If you want to update the students through the UI, you would select Setup Students. Under Setup Students, you will see all of these tasks. You could either search a student. If you want to create a brand new student, you'd click Create, and then you'd click Registration. It would register. It would select all of the tasks under registration. You'd register the student to the administration. You'd manage their tests and their enrollments. Just depending on what you need to do at that time. If you need to edit a student, you could search here in the student box and then click on the task, Edit Students, Edit Registration, or Edit Their Tests, whichever you would need to do once you're in this area. Back to importing, if you are under Import, Export Data, you would see that drop down under Type, and probably see more here than you want to see, but you would select the Student Registration Import or Export. Creating a new student then through the UI, again, I said earlier, you'd select all of these tasks. Then you'd click that Start button. It would take you to this screen, which shows you kind of, I think of it as kind of a wizard across the way. So you create your student, entering state student ID, last name, birth date, sex, first name are all required fields. Local student IDs optional, middle name, state field 1 is optional. When you click Create, it will assign a PARCC student ID. Then you will go on to, then the student will exist under here. You'll go on to Register Students. When I click on that tab, you'll see that my student now appears. Now I'm going to register them to this administration, to 2018 Spring PARCC. So then, again, everything that has a red asterisk is required before you hit Save. If you hit Save and don't fill it out, it will prompt you that you do need to click Save. So just go through all of these fields, fill out what you know, what you can, what's required. Click Save, then we're going to go on to Manage Student Tests. So when you go to Manage Student Tests, you'll see your student underneath Manage Student Tests, and then you select which test they need to be taking, and then any accommodations. If I were able to scroll down here, you see all the different options for each test, math or ELA, that's available. Say you need to undo what you just did, go back to Setup. If you have the ability to delete students, I don't believe everybody has this, you will be able to click the Delete Students and select the students that you need to remove that you had just added. Creating a test session. Again, the same as what we saw in the infrastructure trial. We'll go to Sessions, create and edit test sessions. If you have a test session created, you will see it here. If you want to create a new one, you'll click on Create Session, fill in all of the information we saw earlier on the training side that we can do now in the live side, and you'll click Create. If you want to add students by a class, you can click there. You can either toggle between class or by student, add students to that session. We'll show you here. Just select who you want to add and how you want to organize your students by session. Some do it by classroom, some do it by grade, by testing room. It's all individual. Again, under Resources, printing those student testing tickets, once those test sessions have been set up, all the login information, URL, app information is on the student test ticket. One thing to note, that they are secure materials. the only users in Pearson Access Next that are able to print testing tickets are district test coordinators or school test coordinators. They need to be treated like secure materials until they are handed out to students to allow them to log into the test. Prepare sessions. So again, just wanted to make sure that we remember that step that I showed you. This step cannot happen until one school day prior to starting the test session, so that prior to testing beginning. So you can prepare multiple sessions all at once. It can only be done by district test coordinators or school test coordinators. This is the step that assigns forms to students in the test session. So again, highlighting prior to completing this step, you would want to make sure that all accommodations are updated in that student test registration, because this is where a form will get assigned to a student based off of any accommodation needs. And you will see those accommodation indicators in a later slide. So then once the session's prepared, it can then be started. You can't start test sessions until the day that your test administration opens. So you can either combine, view, prepare them all, start same way. So those accommodation indicators that I mentioned in the test session, if a student has a need for an ASL form, for a screen reader form, AT technology or assistive technology non-screen reader form, closed captioning, text-to-speech, Spanish text-to-speech, or Spanish form, you will see those indicators next to the student's name in the test session if their accommodation was up to date when the prepare button was clicked. So when you prepare the session, if the student registration was up to date and the correct accommodations were selected in the test registration, then these indicators will appear in the test session next to the student's name. So it's a very easy visual indicator to just kind of glance at and make sure, yep. You can go down the list of students that you know that need accommodated forms. After the sessions have been prepared, you've looked at your accommodation indicators, you can start your session. And again, that cannot happen until the testing window is open and the session has been prepared. A couple of operational reports that might be helpful as you're getting ready. We just listed a handful of reports we'll review. We'll cover operational reports in a couple of other slides too, but just things that might be helpful, an operational report that might be helpful to run, the PNP accommodations. Any student in your school that has PNP or accommodations enabled will show up in this report. If it's blank, it means you have no students with PNP or accommodations filled in, so you'll want to make sure that you maybe take a glance at that. Maybe students that are registered but not assigned to a test, so you started through that wizard, through the UI, and you maybe got to registration, but you didn't actually add, oh yeah, but they need a grade 3 math test or a grade 3 ELA test. Maybe students that are registered with ELA but no math, or vice versa, or students maybe that are assigned an online test but they're not actually in a test session. Just some helpful reports that you can run and just make sure that all your data is there and cleaned up before you get to that first day of your test admin. Student transfers between organizations. So just a note for specifics of how you're going to do transfers. So OSSE will assist with transferring student records for you. You're just going to need to submit an OST ticket with the student names and the USIs to request that transfer. If students transfer within your district, you'll follow the steps below. So transferring between districts, between LEAs, you'd follow this top step. Transferring within your LEA, you would follow the steps below. You'd remove their test session, remove the student from the test session. You could change the student organization under Create and Edit Students, change the organization under Manage Student Tests, and then just add the new student to the student that you just moved into another school to a test session within that school. So again, you have to be at the district level to be able to do this, but you can move a student from one school to another. So during testing, so we've gotten everything set up, and now we get into the day testing opens. Session management, again, you will see those lock and unlock features for each unit of the test. only one unit of a student test can be unlocked at one time. You can lock and unlock by session, and you can lock and unlock by student. The unit that they completed testing needs to be locked before you can unlock the next unit and the student begin to test. Students are only able to log into tests if they are in ready or resumed status in Pearson Access Next. And again, here's the lock and unlock at the test session level. Here's my 10 students. You can only see the first 2 right here, but how you would see then their status, you're in ready. You'll see Unit 1 currently is unlocked in this session. Going on to the next slide, just kind of monitoring, you see that the student logged in and then they exited the unit, so they have not completed it. Kind of gives you the overall too. You've got 9 students in this ready status and 1 student in this exited. So you can monitor testing at this level, kind of this is each test then, if they've been able to answer or if they've visited the item. You can kind of see each by student how they progress through testing. Again, their student test and item progress kind of shows you where they would be in the test. That student test status key, units 1, 2, and 3, you can kind of get a visual of where students are then in the test session. If you're only looking at, see now I've got 9 students. If you need to resume, you may click on the drop-down area from exited and resume the student, which would allow the student to log back into their test. That's one way to resume, or you can select the student and then go to the resume student test task in the students and test sessions. So if you didn't listen to me today and you did not update the accommodations before you prepared sessions, and now the student's in a test that does not have text-to-speech and the student needs text-to-speech, that happens, and there is a way to correct it, but it depends on how far the student's gotten. If the student has logged in, it's one set of steps. If the student hasn't logged in, it's another. So let's say you prepare sessions and you don't see those accommodation indicators like you thought you would. That is easier. You just have to take that student, remove them from the session, update their test registration, update their PNP information, and then put the student back in the session, and it will then assign the correct form, and you should see those accommodation indicators. So you can use that screen, accommodation indicator screen, to kind of make sure that they have the correct one next to their name in the test session. Makeup testing. Schools can choose to move students who miss a day of testing into a separate makeup session for that test. So let's say you've got 5 students in 5 different ELA grade 3 sessions that were not there for Unit 1, and you want to move them into a test session together because they're going to make up Unit 1 in a room together. You can either move them into a separate makeup test session, or you can leave them in their original test sessions and just manage through that combined view. Units can be taken out of order for makeup testing only, and then the documentation for makeup testing is available at this link on Avocet as well. Just a quick checklist. If you keep the original test session, a checklist. If you create a new makeup testing test session, a checklist. So just follow whichever you choose, follow the checklist below. Marking a student complete, that would only happen if a student exited and is not at all planning on finishing the test within this test administration. So not something you would do just at the end of the day, not something you would need to do in a bulk basis. It would be on an individual. One student, for whatever reason, is unable to complete testing before the end of the admin. And again, more operational reports that are helpful for during testing. Students who are currently testing online, students with multiple tests, again, go through that reports and down to operational reports, and there's just some couple of helpful reports for during testing. Common error codes that students see in TestNav. We've just listed them out. Again, I won't read them all to you because they're pretty clear here, but a student could receive, a 1009 error code that says unable to download test content, and they might raise their hand, and then that might indicate that there's a network connection issue between that student's device and the Pearson server or the ProctorCaching server. So maybe for whatever reason, maybe their Wi-Fi is not on and they need to have that turned on. So just a few different errors that could pop up as a student is trying to log into TestNav. I think we have 3 full screens of these. Again, this new error code and the Control-Alt-Delete new error code. 4 slides for common error codes. One we see often, students maybe have gone to the training TestNav version through the TestNav instance on the app. They've taken a practice test, and now it's time to go take their actual PARCC test, not a practice test. And so they'll get a 9059 error. The username or password you entered is incorrect. And often it's that they're not in the District of Columbia TestNav instance in the app. So they would need to go back out and select District of Columbia instead of, it would say PARCC training if they were still in the training site or the training TestNav instance. So those TestNav instructions will all be included in that guide, but just kind of a common issue that we hear of, just making sure that all those devices are set to go before testing day to the District of Columbia TestNav instance. More technical troubleshooting, how to resume a student in Pearson Access Next. One thing that is key here, having the student log in again. Let's say they have trouble, they get kicked out. So you would go into Pearson Access Next, you would resume that student test. So you'd click on, I showed you where it said exited in that red button. There's a little black arrow, drop down arrow. You'd select resume instead of exited. They would then be able to log back in. You want to make sure they log in on the same device. And one thing that we also recommend doing is when you hand out those student testing tickets, there is a field on the student testing ticket, a blank line that says optional, local, and then it's in parentheses optional, and then local testing device ID. Oftentimes, you will want the student to log on to the same device that they previously tested on, and if there is a glitch or an error or they get kicked out for whatever reason, those student files are saved on the local computer as their primary, and then there's a secondary if you set it up in your TestNav configuration. But it oftentimes schools don't know and students don't know which device they logged into. So if there's an ID on the device, it's helpful for students to maybe write that down on their testing ticket that this is the device, device number 3782. I use this device to test my Unit 1, and then if they have no problems, they can test again on any device. But if we do some troubleshooting, we will ask you to have the student log in on the same device that they tested on. So again, only in troubleshooting would that need to happen, but something to think ahead on. If it's easy for students to capture which device they're using, then you don't have to go hunt around and play the guessing game if there is some error that would maybe occur. Again, don't move the student to another testing device unless they were able to safely exit the test, and if they get kicked out, we do want them logging back into the same testing device. And then again, your secondary save locations is another key setup during your TestNav configurations that will save your student response file to a second location instead of just the primary local drive. Some early warning system and error codes, just some documentation, some resources, TestNet 8 online support. I think we've pulled this a couple of times. Early warning system triggers, TestNav error codes. We gave some most common ones in this PowerPoint, but the full list is at this link. And then how to handle student response files and log files if there's any need to go and hunt down in the guts of the device, the student response file and any log files to get to send to our level 2 folks that will help out if there is for some reason, a technology question or error or something that needs more technology expertise on if there's an issue. hopefully you don't need that at all. So expected behaviors in TestNav. Again, not all things have error messages, and not all problems are technical issues. We do have some expected behaviors listed out in a document that's available at this link. Some people log in, some students log into TestNav, and they might expect it to work a certain way, or for something specific to happen, like being able to resize the notepad, for example. All of those things that we know exist in TestNav and that will not be changed and are not problems are in this expected behaviors document. Just something helpful to just kind of take a look at, or maybe have available for a proctor or test administrator, so that they can tell students right away, oh yeah, no, you're not supposed to, you can't copy and paste passage text in your ELA test in your open response. You have to just type yourself. So just some expected behaviors that just kind of show how TestNav is expected to behave. So after students have completed testing, just some cleanup steps. First item is stopping those test sessions. After all students have completed testing in your session, you can stop the test session. Students have to be either in the marked complete or completed status. Any students who you have in the test session that never logged into a test, all units are still ready because they never showed up, or they've moved, or whatever, you can just remove those students from the test session. And then if a student is for some reason exited or resumed, like I said, they left testing and they said they were never coming back, but they did initially log in, you will have to then mark those units complete. Again, the screen for marking students complete is here. You won't want to mark any ready students complete. Only these students you would want to remove from the test session. To remove them from the test session, you would go to that, you'd select the students and go to the task Remove Students from Sessions, click on it, click Remove. Another thing to look at after testing, the little red flag up in your header bar in Pearson Access Next will show you if there are any student errors, any student critical warnings, or any student warnings. Critical warnings really will be maybe data fields that should be filled out but weren't required before the student began testing. I think some examples here, as a student English learner, Title III, gifted and talented. These are not required to get the student to test, but will appear as critical warnings as information that should be filled in after the student's test. To purge the ProctorCaching content, so you're done testing, you want to purge it off of your server or your ProctorCaching computer, you'd go back to the ProctorCaching installer, you'd click Purge. And again, some post-test operational reports, after testing operational reports that are helpful. Students that have warnings, students with a SHIP report, district or school that does not exist, not a valid organization. I don't think that should happen this year. Student tests that have been assigned but not yet completed. Online student tests that have been marked complete. Just a couple of reports that are available that are helpful in that after testing cleanup. So just a couple of slides on additional information, some resources, student readiness, to get those students ready to look at TestNav and take those tests and use the tools. There are practice tests. The first thing that we did was go through Pearson Access Next and do an infrastructure trial. Those same practice tests that if we had done the infrastructure trial are also available at parc.pearson.com/practice-tests. So you can click that and students can access that. It's a public site that can be accessed just in a browser, and they can just take a look at those practice tests there. Again, you'd want to use Pearson Access Next if you're running an infrastructure trial, but for just getting students ready and playing with the tools and maybe checking out the some of the accommodated forms, the text-to-speech, the ASL form, et cetera, you could go to this site. For tutorials on TestNav 8, for paper tests, online tests, all the accommodations, functionality guides are located, the tutorials located at parc.pearson.com/tutorial. Another quick thing on student readiness that they are all available in the apps. To navigate to the app home screen and choose PARCC training, again, we talked about it before. It said District of Columbia. If you have that, if it shows as District of Columbia when they're logging in and they want to go through Pearson Access Next through an infrastructure trial, they will need to go up to their upper right-hand corner and select Choose a Different Customer and then select PARCC Training. So again, that's kind of going between those two TestNav instances of PARCC Training and District of Columbia, depending on whether or not you're taking a practice test through an infrastructure trial using Pearson Access Next or taking a live PARCC test under the District of Columbia TestNav instance. Real quick note on on-demand reports. Once all the student scores have been, or all student responses have been scored, scores posted, on-demand reports will be available in Pearson Access Next. Specific dates for that availability will be announced later once everything is complete. Just, again, everything under the support tab within Pearson Access Next, lots of other materials, the quick, link to the user, online user guide, user file, sample layout, a couple of different things under the support tab that you can access while you are logged in to Pearson Access Next. And then our support information, parc.pearson.com/support. Anything that you need help with, you can either chat with us through Pearson Access Next, go here to open a support ticket, or make a phone call. We are open Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and staffed with people to answer questions or chat with you through Pearson Access Next. Again, the resources that we discussed earlier, all these manuals, modules, AVASET documents, all available on parc.pearson.com. If you select manuals, modules, training, AVASET, it will take you to /training-modules. And then I believe one of our last documents to make sure you know about on AVASET is the Accessibility Features and Accommodations Manual. Lots of questions about how to make decisions to ensure, that, that you have students set up correctly. And then we call it our PARCC portal, but I've been referring to it, parc.pearson.com. Again, central area where everything is located. You can access any practice tests, manuals, training modules, admin bulletins, tech bulletins, technology setup information, all located there. So we have made it to the Q&A portion. I talked longer than I think I thought I would. I do not have any new questions in chat. I can go ahead and give an opportunity for questions to be asked in chat, or I can unmute all lines and let you just ask questions if you're just on the call. Okay, I don't have any. Oh, I do have a new question in chat. Any advice for assistive technology for Chromebooks? I am going to defer that question. We have Jeff Heathman on the call as well, and Jeff, I think you're unmuted. If you
I am, Melanie, and I can take it.
Don't mind jumping in and taking this, it would be perfect.
I got it. So, can you hear me?
Yep, I can. Thanks.
Okay, so for assistive technology users on Chromebooks, the only assistive technology, and this is an update to the assistive technology guidelines for spring 2018, but the only assistive technology available for use on Chromebooks is the embedded OS-supported Chrome box. So that's embedded in the device OS and can be used, and it's now accessible. Any other assistive technology, there is a roadblock that's on the Google side. So right now, the way assistive technology is supported on Chromebooks is through custom extensions. And custom extensions are blocked by Google when in secure kiosk mode, which is required for PARCC assessment. So by nature, those assistive technologies are not allowed to function within a secure assessment by Google. So the only one you can use is Chromebox. I know some common ones that people like to use are the embedded speech-to-text functionality in a Chromebook, or co-writer, or read and write gold. And right now, those just are not available as an option. So as another option, you can use, with approval from your state, a Chromebook as a third-party external device. So what that means is a student is logged into a TestNav on one device where they're responding, and they have another device, which would be a Chromebook, running that external third-party AT, so word prediction or something like that. So they type the responses in that Chromebook, and then they would have a test administrator transcribe. So the reason you need to follow up with your state on guidance is because a Chromebook requires an internet connection to use a Google Doc to capture the student's responses, and that by nature violates the third party, which says you can't have internet access. So you could use that third party device with approval from the state and have somebody transcribe with those other assistive technologies. But just to reiterate, the only one that works currently is the embedded screen reader Chromebox. And you're very welcome.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. And very good question. The only other question so far I see on chat is how soon will this presentation be available? Kathy, I think I'll defer to you on when it will be posted, but as soon as I finish this up, we'll finish the recording, and I imagine the court recording and the PowerPoint will be out to you shortly.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. We will do our best to get an updated version of the slides out to everyone tomorrow for those who registered, and then we'll be posting information online, the slides and the presentation, hopefully by the end of the week, maybe early next week. But the slides with all the links and information, we should be able to get out to you guys tomorrow.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions in chat? I haven't seen any. I'm going to have to unmute all lines now, so if you're talking and you think you're on mute, you're going to be off mute really quick. And we'll wait about 1 or 2 more minutes if there's any questions that you want to ask off mute, and then if not, we'll end the call. Okay, so now everyone's unmuted. If there are any questions that you want to ask as opposed to chat, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Just a question for the student registration PNP upload. We received before the due date was the 23rd. I did make some adjustments after that date. Is that still okay? I mean, I'm hit the due date. I mean, I know we passed the due date and I made some adjustments after the fact. Is that still all right?
So what happens with adjustments after the fact, most of them should be fine. As little registration adjustments happen, you can update those as accessibility features are entered and test sessions are entered. All of those components can be entered later. The main thing that we wanted to ensure was entered accurately were accommodations, particularly those that have materials needed. The shipping information for materials is going to be pulled or was pulled recently by Pearson. So if you made any adjustments to those, you just need to check and verify that they come through with your initial order, and you don't need to make an additional order based on those changes.
And say we're doing all online, and I just made some adjustments to accommodations, today. That shouldn't be an issue, no?
Pretty much. The only exceptions would be if you're online testing with students, but they do still require some sort of material, like a read-aloud script or something of that nature. So there are materials associated with some online testing, but most of it should be fine.
The most of the stuff that would have required, that was in yesterday, so I think we're okay.
Great. Thanks so much. All right. If we don't have any additional questions, I want to thank Melanie for the presentation. Really appreciated everything you presented today. Thank you, Jeff, for jumping in, and anyone else from Pearson who was behind the scenes during this, ready to be available if needed. As I said, we'll be sending these slides out to everyone hopefully by tomorrow and posting the information online. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us here at OSSE. If they are technical questions, like a lot of the things Melanie described today, reach out to Pearson Support Hotline or chat with them while you're in Pearson Access Next to get support throughout testing and prior to it while you're setting up. We really appreciate you being here, and thanks to everyone at Pearson again for the great presentation today.
All right, thank you. I'm going to stop recording now, and then I'll send it your way, Kathy.